to the Python Beginners tutorial. In this video we're going to be going over variables and the LEGB rule. So what is a variable? A variable is a data structure that can hold a piece of data in memory. Python has no command for declaring a variable. So to declare a variable, you type the name of the variable, followed by an equal sign, and then the data you want to assign that variable to. Now in Python there are a few rules when naming your variables. You must start with a letter or an underscore character. Variables cannot start with a number, and variables can only contain alphanumeric characters and underscores, and variable names are case sensitive. The examples you can see are assigning variables one line at a time. It is possible in Python to assign multiple variables on one line. So to assign multiple variables you can write comma-separated declaration names followed by a single equal sign, and then in order each piece of data that you want to assign to that variable. So once we have these variables assigned in our Python program, how do we output them? Print is often used to output variables. To print a variable, type print and then inside parentheses the name of the variable. So if we run that, we'll see the value of our variable printed. You may also want to describe the variables you are outputting, say for example when you're printing out quite a few variables at a time. To do this, use a string that describes the variable, or whatever you want to write. Close the string, and then between the string and the variable add a plus sign to concatenate the string and the variable. Note, this only works for string variables in Python. We'll get onto integers in a moment. So as you can see, that has outputted the string we want and the value of the variable. We can also concatenate two variables together, so we'll use x and y from earlier. And if we try to run that, what you will see is they'll concatenate together. So let's go on to integers. We can output number variables the same way as strings. Let's create a variable num and assign it to 36 and then print it. Python will output 36. However, what we can't do with integer variables the same way as strings is, as I mentioned earlier, concatenate them with strings. If we were to try to do that, we would receive an error, as you can see. But to get around this, Python has a string function, so we can just pass in our integer variable into the string function, and we are able to print out a description of the variable and the integer variable itself. If we were to add two integer variables in a print statement, then the output would be the sum of the two variables. To demonstrate this, we're going to create another variable num2 and assign it to 64. When we print num1 plus num2, then Python will output 100. We can also assign an integer variable to the sum of two other integer variables. To demonstrate this, we're going to create the variable sum and assign it to num plus num2, and then print sum. If we run this Python, we're going to output 100 for both print statements. So now let's look at how Python deals with scope. Python has a local, enclosing, global, and built-in rule. The order in which Python will look for a reference to a variable is in that order. Global variables are declared outside of a function and can be used everywhere, both inside and out of functions. So if we declare a function like so, we can access that variable anywhere. So we're going to declare a function, and inside that function output our global variable. To run that function, we are going to call it. Then we can run our Python program again. A local variable is defined inside a function and can only be accessed inside that function. So we can output the variable if we put output statement inside the function. If we put it outside that function, then we will receive an error because the variable is not defined in scope. We're going to demonstrate that by writing two print statements, one inside the function where the local variable is defined, and the second outside that function. So the first print statement will print the value of the local variable. However, when we try to print the variable outside of the function it was defined in, we're going to get this error. So what happens if we have a local and global variable with the same name? Well, it just goes back to the local, enclosing, global, and built-in rule. If we put the output statement inside the function in which the local variable is defined, then Python will look at the local scope first, and in this case, find the local variable, and it will stop there, outputting the variables. Now, let's look at built-in functions. We're going to use the max built-in function as an example. This takes an array of integers and returns the largest integer. As you can see here, if we pass in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to the max function, it will output 5. But what if we were to create our own max function and have it in the same program? So let's define a function called max with no argument. We're just going to pass the function to make it valid Python. So now when we try to output the max function, we get an error. This is because it's going to look at our function before the built-in one, as the built-in is the last in the priority list of the local, enclosing, global, and built-in rule. This specific error is because the function we defined doesn't take any arguments, and we're trying to pass in an array. So now we're going to look at nested functions. A nested function is where a function is defined inside of another function. This is going to demonstrate the enclosing part of the local, enclosing, global and built-in rule. We're going to define an outer function here. Within this outer function, we're going to define a variable x that is assigned to outer. Next, we're going to define a nested function, so that within this outer function, we're going to define an inner function. Within inner, we're going to define another variable x, and we're going to assign that to inner. We're then going to output the variable inside the inner function. Then we're going to run that inner function. Below that, we're going to output the outer x variable. Finally, we're going to run the outer function. So let's run through what just happened there. The first print statement has printed inner because it's in the local scope. The second print statement has printed outer because the inner variable is no longer in scope, but the outer still is. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe, like and comment down below if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer them.